In this mini course, I'm gonna show you how to set up a minimalistic CRUD web app using Blazor WebAssembly and ASP.NET Core minimal web APIs, so that at the end of it, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of how to do that and have a reference application to kickstart your CRUD apps. I'll also cover publishing the projects to the Microsoft Azure Cloud on 3-tier resources. We'll publish the WebAssembly app to an Azure Static Web App resource and publish the API to an Azure App Service resource. This is an intermediate level mini course, so I am assuming that you have a basic understanding of C#, .NET and general web development concepts. It's split into two parts. This is the second part and will focus on creating the Blazor WebAssembly frontend. So the application you've been seeing behind me is the end result of this mini course. I'll just quickly demo it for you. So we have a very simple post model with a post ID, which is the primary key, and a title text field and a content text field. And we can do all the CRUD operations on this post. So I'll just create a new one and I'll just add demo and hit create, and we get an alert saying it worked. I'll hit OK, close that, and here at the bottom it shows up, and we can also update it. So I'll just add updated and update that and hit OK and close, and now we see it's updated. And let's finally delete it. We get a modal asking if we're sure. I'm gonna confirm that, get an alert, I'll hit OK, and it disappears. I'll just delete another one. Alright, there we go. And if I refresh, we see the changes have been persisted to the database. Alright, so that's what we're gonna build. You can download the source code created in this mini course for free via the link in the description below. I'll also add links there to the sources I used. So I'm Ruben, and it's my goal to help you learn software development in C# and .NET. And this video came out on New Year's Eve, so I'd like to wish you a happy and healthy new year. The technologies we'll use for both parts, we'll use .NET 6 LTS and C# 10. For the first part, the backend, we'll use ASP.NET Core minimal web APIs, Entity Framework Core, SQLite and Azure App Service. And for the second part, the front end, we'll be using Blazor WebAssembly, Bootstrap for the UI, Git hosted on GitHub, and we'll set up a simple continuous integration pipeline to an Azure Static Web App. For the IDE, I'll be using Visual Studio 2022. Now let's get started building. So I'll just close Edge. So I have opened Visual Studio and the solution from part 1. You can get it via the link in the description below. Right, so we're gonna work in the Blazor WebAssembly client project that was already added in part 1. And as a reminder, in part 1 we built an API facilitating CRUD operations that's now ready for consumption. Right, so I'm just gonna start the client project and see what we have. So I'll open a terminal. If you don't have one open, you can do it with view terminal. And by the way, if you want your terminal to look like this, check out my tutorial linked above me where I show you how to set that up. Then I'll cd into the client project and run .NET Watch. A browser window opens up, and as you can see, this is just the default Blazor UI. So we won't need 90% of this. I want to keep it minimal. So let's start by cleaning this up. So I'll close my browser and back in Visual Studio. Because of the big edits I'm gonna do, I'll just stop it from running with Ctrl+C. Alright, to start off, I'll open client, root, and delete this sample data folder. So delete enter. And I'm gonna open CSS and delete open iconic. And here we can see that Bootstrap is imported by default in the Blazor templates. So in this mini course we'll use that. So I'll tuck it back in and go to pages, and I'm gonna delete counter and fetch data. So control click, delete, and open up index, and I'm gonna remove everything below the heading 1. Save that. And I'll just change the page title to Blazor WASM and minimal APIs, CRUD, mini course. Alright, and I'm gonna copy that and paste it into the heading 1. Alright, then I'm gonna tuck this back in, open the shared folder. I'm gonna delete survey prompt and nav menu, and I'm gonna delete, so I'll expand this main layout and delete the component level CSS and open up main layout, and I'm gonna extract this add body statement with Ctrl X and delete all the HTML and just paste the add body. Save that. And I'll just display everything we'll build in a centered container. So I'll do main, and in there I'll add a div, and in there I'll add another div and just cut and paste the body in there. And let's add some classes. So for the main I'll do container, and for the first div I'll do row and give that a min vh 100 and justify content center and align items center. Then for the second div I'll give that a class of col and bg light and p-4. Alright, save that. And I want to drag and drop this main layout in the client project root and delete the shared folder, because that reduces bugs for me. So I'll drag and drop it on the client and delete shared. And I'm also gonna open up imports.razor and delete client.shared from there. And I'm just gonna run the project again to see if this worked. So save all, and in my terminal I'm gonna do the up arrow and just enter. Alright, and there we go. We have a centered column with the contents of index.razor in it. Right, so we're ready to start displaying some posts now. So I'll just open my browser and Visual Studio side by side, and I'll make my browser as small as possible. And now we should see our changes happening live in the browser because of hold reload. Alright, so I'm gonna close imports and main layout, and back in index I want to start by getting all the posts from the server. So I'll add at the bottom a code directive, and I want to do this when the component is initialized. So we'll override a Blazor lifecycle method for that. So I'll type protected override, and then we get the IntelliSense, and I'll go for uninitialized async, and I'm gonna change the method signature to protected override async task. Alright, and remove this return base call. Save that. So let's communicate with our server, and I'll just do always restart here. So I'll open another terminal and I'm gonna .NET run it because we won't need a browser. Alright, so the server is running and we will communicate with the HTTPS variant. So I'll select that and right click it to copy to my clipboard, and I'll just paste it as a comment in index here. Right, so to make HTTP requests in Blazor, we can use the built-in HTTP client, and if we open program.cs, we can see that it's already added to the dependency injection. And in Blazor WebAssembly, the scoped variant is the same as singleton. According to the docs, Blazor WebAssembly apps don't currently have a concept of dependency injection scopes. So we'll just leave it as scoped. Alright, so I'll close that. And back in index, let's inject HTTP client into this component. And we can do add inject or brackets inject. It's up to you what you prefer. I like the brackets option. So above this uninitialized async, I'll do inject. And I'll do protected HTTP client. And I'll name it HTTP client. And add a cat and a set. Alright, and we'll get the non-nullable warning that's now the default in .NET 6. And in this case we can ignore it because Microsoft's dependency injection will make sure this HTTP client isn't null. So let's mute it with a pragma directive. So I'm gonna do hashtag pragma warning disable and then the warning code, which is CS8618. And I'll copy that line, go below the HTTP client and paste it. And instead of disable, I'll do warning restore. Alright, save that. Okay, so let's use this HTTP client now to get all the posts. So below the warning restore, I'll add private list of type post, and I'm gonna make it nullable, and I'll name it underscore posts equals null. And our component doesn't know what a post is yet, so we need to add a using statement for that. But I'm gonna add it in imports.razor so that it's available to all our components. So open that up, and first of all I'll reference the shared project. So I'm gonna right click client and add a project reference, and I'm gonna tick shared and hit OK. So I'm gonna do add using global : shared dot models. Alright, so that's added. I'm gonna close the imports, and back in index we see the component now knows what a post is. So in uninitialized async, I'll do underscore posts equals, I'll wait, HTTP client dot get from JSON async, and for the generic, the type we expect to receive is a list of type post, and that list is nullable. Alright, and we'll then add parentheses, semicolon, and then this expects a request URI or URL. So for that, I'll just copy and paste this development server address, and I'm gonna add /posts/all. And if you forgot what the endpoints were, you can go to server program.cs and we see /posts/all. Alright, save that, and then let's check in the browser console if this worked. So in Blazor WebAssembly, using console.writeLine, we'll write it out to the browser console. So below it I'll do console.writeLine, and I'll do an interpolated string and do found, then curly braces, underscore posts dot count posts. Alright, and I'll hit F12 to open the dev tools, and I'll refresh the page. and we get an expected error because of CORS. So CORS stands for Cross Origin Resource Sharing, and it basically restricts resource sharing. So resources are things like these post objects between computers over the internet. And we need to jump back into the server project to change our CORS policy. I'll open server, program.cs. And security is not the focus of this mini course, so I'll just add a very lenient CORS policy. So below the var builder line, I'll add builder.services.add CORS and add parentheses semicolon. And we're gonna do a lambda expression here. So I'll take in an options object, do an arrow, go to the next line, add curly braces, enter that, and then we'll do options.add default policy. Again, I'll do parentheses semicolon, and in there we'll do another lambda expression. So we'll take a builder object, arrow, and go to the next line, curly braces, enter, and for that I'll do builder.allow any origin, and on the next line I'm gonna do .allow any header, and on the next line I'll do .allow any method, parentheses semicolon. Save that. Right, and now let's add it to the middleware so it's actually used during HTTP requests. So around line 34, below use HTTPS redirection, I'll add app.use CORS and save that. And now I want to restart the server project. So in the terminal I'll do Ctrl+C and up arrow and enter. Alright, so if I now refresh in the browser, we see in the terminal we get found 6 posts. Awesome. So that works. So I'll close program.cs, and now I want to display all these posts in a Bootstrap table. And this should have a question mark so that we check if it's not null before we do count. Little typo there. Right, so now I want to display all the posts in a Bootstrap table. I'll just open an Edge instance because that should be my development browser, but it's a hassle to change the default in the command line in Visual Studio. So I've been defeated and just use Chrome now for Blazor development. But okay, I'll Google Bootstrap 5 table, or I'll Bing it, I guess. And I'm gonna open the first link to the Bootstrap docs. And I'll also add this page to the description below. So Bootstrap gives us some snippets to work with. So I'll copy this first overview snippet with this little copy button and minimize edge. And back in Visual Studio, I'll paste it below the H1. And we need to remove all the add signs because in Blazor those are directives. So I'm gonna remove those and save. And there we go. Just close this console. We now see a table. And I want to change the design a little bit. So I'm gonna tuck the table in and wrap it in a div. I'll cut it and paste it in there and hit Ctrl+KD to reformat. So I'm gonna give the div a class of table-responsive. Alright, and to the table element I'll also add some classes. So I'll add table-bordered and make the border dark, and I'll do table dash striped. Save that. Alright, looks good to me. Right, so let's now make this dynamic and show the posts. So in the TR, in the T head, so table head, table row, I'll change the text of the first column to post ID, parentheses PK, so primary key, and the second one I'll do title, for the third one I'll do content, and for the fourth one I'll do actions. Save that. Okay, there we go. Then in the table body, I'm gonna remove all but the first row, and above this table row we'll do a for each loop to show all the posts. So I'll first check add if the underscore posts isn't null. Then I want to do add for each. So for each var post in underscore posts, I want to render out a table row. So I'll cut and paste that in there. Control KD to reformat, and then let's add some dynamic data to this. So in the first one, I'm gonna do add post.postID. In the second one, I'll do add post.title. In the third one, I'll do add post.content. And in the fourth one, I'll remove all the text, hit enter to open that up. And then I'll add a button and give that a class of btn, btn-warning, w-100, and mb-2, so margin bottom 2, and I'll add the text of update. Save that. Right. I'll copy and paste that button and change it from btn warning to btn danger. Keep the w100 and remove the margin bottom and give that a text of delete. Save that. Alright, I'll just hit F5 or this button to refresh that. And yeah, it's still working. Awesome. So now we see all the posts that are in our database. Alright, and let me just maximize my browser to see how it looks. Okay, so I'm happy with this. And we've now implemented the read portion of the CRUD operations. And if you're still watching, thank you. If you want more free content like this, make sure you like and subscribe. So we're left with the create, update and delete operations. And the order doesn't really matter, so let's do create next. And a lot of applications allow you to do CRUD in little pop-up windows called modals. So that's what I want to go for in this mini course. So Bootstrap has modals available for us. So I'll just open Edge again. And in the Bootstrap 5 docs, I'll search for modal and click modal/modal. And I'll also add this link to the description below. So Bootstrap does the DOM manipulation with JavaScript, but because we're using Blazor, we don't really need the JavaScript they use. We can just show and hide the modals based on simply a boolean, so show the modal if the boolean is true and hide it if it's false. So I'll just scroll down to the static backdrop one and launch it. As you can see, the modal opens up, and that's kind of the look I want to go for. So I'll close it, and let's use this as a starting point. So I'll copy this code and minimize Edge, minimize Chrome. I'll just maximize Visual Studio. So I'm going to create a new component to show this modal in. So I'll right click client, add new folder, and I'm going to name it components. And I'm going to right click that folder and add a Razor component, and I'll name it modal create post. And I'll remove that heading 3 and paste the modal code from my clipboard. Save that. Okay, let's now hook this up with the index page so that we can open and close it. So back in index, above the table, I'll add a button. So button, I'm going to give that a class of btn, btn success, btn large, and w100, and margin bottom 3, and to give that the text of create post. That. Okay, so when this is clicked, the modal should open. So in the add code below the list, I'll add a boolean. So private bool underscore showing create modal equals false. Okay, let's use that. So I'll scroll up, and above the h1 I'll do add if underscore showing create modal. And if that's true, I'm gonna render out the modal create post component. So a less than sign, and then I'll type modal create post, just hit tab to accept that. I'll remove the client.components and just right click it, go to the quick actions and import the using statement. Alright. Okay, so now we simply need to set this boolean to true when the create button is clicked. So I'll add an onClick. So add onClick equals double quotes, and I'll do a lambda, so parentheses arrow underscore showing create modal equals true. Save that and just restart the project if needed. So I'll open it side by side again with Chrome, and let's click this create button, and there we go, the component is showing. So if I click this, nothing happens. Let's now make it so that the actual modal shows. So back in modal create post, I'm gonna remove this button trigger modal and just remove this comment. Save that. And I'm gonna remove data BS everywhere, because that's the JavaScript that's running and we don't need that. So it's here in the first line, also data BS keyboard. I'll just zoom out. Also data BS dismiss. And I'll also remove this tab index, and in the close button there's also a data BS, so remove that, and that is all. Alright, I'll save that. And lastly, in the first div I'll add the show and d-block classes so that it's actually showing. Save that. Right, so if we now click create post, I'll just refresh. If we now click create post, the modal shows up, but there's no transparent background. So we'll just add that ourselves. We'll go to www.root CSS, app.css, and below the h1 focus I'll add a class, and I'll follow the Bootstrap utility style classes. So I'll do .bg-health-black, add curly braces, enter, and I'll set the background to RGBA, right? And I'll do 0, 0, 0 for black, and for the transparency I'll do 0.5. Alright, so close that. Back in modal create post, I'll just add this bg half black to the first div, and there we go, hot reload picked it up. So there's our transparent background. I'll just refresh my browser to reset the state, which will close the modal. Right, I'll open it again. And there we go, there's our modal. So now I want to center this modal vertically. So to the modal dialog div, I'll add modal-dialog-centered. Save that. There we go. And around line 6, I'll just change the title to create post. Alright. Okay, that looks good. Right, if I maximize it works too. But now if I try to close it, it doesn't work. So what we need to do is, if we press one of the close buttons, we need to set that modal open boolean in index here to false. And we can do that with Blazor component parameters. So we'll use a delegate, and delegates allow us to kind of pass lines of code to run as parameters for other code. So in the modal create post, in the code, I'll add brackets parameter. I'm gonna do public event callback, and I'll name it onClick button close, and add a get and a set. Now let's invoke this event callback when a close button is clicked. So around line 6, I'll add to the button a add onClick equals, and I'll do a lambda, and then I'll call onClick button close dot invoke async parentheses. I'm gonna copy this onClick and I'll add it to the close button. Alright, so now back in the index page, if we go to modal create post, we can now fill in this parameter. So onClick button close equals, and in there we can specify lines of code we want to run when a close button is clicked. So we can do a lambda because it's just one line. So a lambda, and I'll run showing create modal equals false, and I'll save that. And because delegates and lambdas confused me, and maybe others too, I want to show you that we can just pass in a method here too. Instead of the lambda, I'll pass in close modal. And now we need to create that method. So I'll copy the name and scroll down to the code. And below oninitialized async, I'll add private void and then paste the close modal, parentheses, curly braces. And the only line I want to run here is underscore showing create modal equals false. Okay, so let's try this out. I'll click create post, and if I now hit one of the close buttons, it closes. Yay! Let's implement the actual create functionality now. So I'll open the modal create post component, and to get data from the user, I'll use the built-in edit form component. So I'm gonna wrap the modal body and modal footer in an edit form. So I'll do edit form and select the body and footer, cut it, paste it in the edit form, Ctrl KD to reformat. So that edit form wants a post object to work with and something to call when the submit button is clicked. So in the code below the parameter, I'll add private post and name it underscore post to create equals new, and I'll just initialize the properties here. So I'll set the post ID to 0, let the server fill that in for us. I'll set the title to post title and set the content to post content. Now in the edit form, I'll add the model parameter and pass in the post to create. And for the method that actually creates the post, I'll go to the code and add private void create post. Okay, now in the edit form, I'll add the onValid submit parameter and pass in create post. And on the understood button, I'll change the type to submit, and I'll change the primary class to success and change the text to create. Okay, let's see if this works. So in the create post method, I'll add console.writeLine, and for the value I'll do create post. Save that, and back in my browser I'll open the DevTools with F12, go to the console, and I'll open the modal with create post. And if we now hit create, we see create post shows up in the console. Awesome. Now let's add some fields so that the user can pass in data. So let's go to the Bootstrap docs again, and I'm gonna search for forms in the docs and click the first one. I'll also add this link to the description below. And if we scroll down a bit, we see this example form. And I'm just gonna copy this first div for the email. So copy that, I'll minimize edge, and we're gonna paste that into the modal body instead of the 3 dots, and hit Ctrl KD, save that, and there we go, an input field shows up. And let's change this a little bit, so we don't need this help text. So I'll delete that, and I'm gonna remove the area described by from the input. And Blazor actually has built-in input components, so let's just use those. So above the input I'll add input text, make that self-closing, and that has a bind value parameter so that we can tell the edit form for which value or property of the model this input field is for. So I'll pass in add bind value and set that to the underscore post to create dot title. And let's copy and paste the class and the ID from the Bootstrap input element, paste it after the bind value, and delete the Bootstrap input. And now I'll change everywhere where it says email, I'll just change it to title and set the ID of the input text to title. And for the label text, I'll change that to title. Okay, there we go. Let's test this out. So in the create post, I'll modify the right line to an interpolated string and log the post to create .title. So I'll do create post, separator, and then title colon curly braces, the underscore post to create .title. Save that. So I'll open the modal and just hit create, and there we go. We see it logs out to the console. I'll change the value of the input, hit create, and there we go. We see it shows the value of the input. Nice. Let's add the content field now. So I'll copy and paste the title input. I'm gonna change everything there to content. So it's for the content, and change the ID to content, and I'll change the bind value also to content, and I'll also change this component to an input text area. Save that, and I want to log that out too. So in the create post, I'll do after the title, I'll do another separator and do content colon curly braces, then the post to create .content. Save that. Let's test it out. I'll open the modal and just add test to the fields, hit create, and there we go. It seems to be working. Let's change the values, and that works. So if you remember from part 1, we also added data annotations to the model. I'll just open the model to show you. In shared models post, we see in the data annotations brackets that there are some requirements like max length. Those work not only in the backend but also in our Blazor frontend, which is awesome. So I'll close post, and back in modal create post, below the content field, I'll add a data annotations validator component and a validation summary component. So if I now pass in more than 100 characters for the title, it should fail. So I'll just copy and paste this a bunch of times. And there we go. We now see an error pops up saying the field title must be a string or array type with a maximum length of 100. And if I hit create now, nothing happens. Also, if I make it empty, we'll get the title field is required. Same for the content. So that's working. Okay, now let's finish this feature off by actually creating the post on the server. So I'll go to the code, and we'll need an HTTP client for this. So let's inject that. So I'll just go to index and copy the injection. We do it like this. Copy the injection with the pragma and go back to the modal component and paste it below parameter. Okay, then I'll go to the create post method, and I'll just make it asynchronous because I believe everything in HTTP client is asynchronous. So I'll do, instead of void, I'll do async task create post, and I'll rename it with Ctrl+RR to create post async. Alright, and I'll just change the write line method name to create post async. Save that. Alright, now to do the actual HTTP request, I'll do HTTP response message, and I'll name that response equals, I'll wait, HTTP client dot post as JSON async. and in the generic we'll pass in a post, and we'll make the call to our server. So I'll get the address from index.razor, copy that, paste it here, and instead of all posts we'll do create and add a comma and send up our post to create. And don't worry, later on we'll handle the server address to call in a better way. Then I want to check if it worked. So first I'll add a new private field to store the created post in that we get back from the server. So below post to create I'll add private post, make it nullable, call it underscore created post, and I'll just initialize it to null. Then below response I'll add if response.is success status code. I want to set the underscore created post to await response.content.read from JSON async. And I want to read out a post model. So pass that in as the generic and parentheses semicolon. And then I'm gonna check if that created post isn't null. And then I'll just add a comma, comment success, so then it worked. Else, so response is success status code, else I'll just add a comment saying failure. Okay, so for this mini course I'll show the result in a little browser alert window. So we need to call some built-in JavaScript code from Blazor for that. We're gonna use JavaScript interop, and we need to inject the IJS runtime for that. That's added to the dependency injection framework by default. So let's inject it. So below the HTTP client, I'll actually just copy and paste it. Change the type to IJS runtime. And I'll change the name to JS runtime. Okay, and that's all we need to call built-in JavaScript functions. So in create post, I'll replace the success comment with await JS runtime dot invoke void async. And for the function name, we'll do alert. And for the message or the arguments, or called args here, an object array, it will just pass in a string. So post creation successful. Close the modal to see it in the table. And I'll copy this line. And for the failure, I'll do post creation failed and remove the rest. Save that. Okay, let's try this out. So I'll hit create post and I'll just add API to the fields and hit create. And there we go, we get post creation successful. So I'll hit OK and close the DevTools and hit close. And for now I'll just hit F5 to see if it shows up. And there we go. We see our new post has been added to the database. Yay! So creation works. I'll leave the more beautiful arrow handling to you guys. So I actually want to add the created post we get back from the server to the list on the index page without doing another get all posts API call, and we can modify our event callback for that. So on the event callback we can add a generic, and that will get sent with when it is invoked as a parameter. So I'll do public event callback and add a generic, And for the type, I'll pass in a nullable post. And when we invoke this event callback, we need to pass in either null or a post. So in the first close button, I'll change the onClick. So we'll pass in the underscore created post. And the created post will be null if creation has either not been done or failed. And if it's null, our index component will know not to add it to the list of posts. Right, so I'll do the same for the second close button. So just pass in the underscore created post. Save that. Then back to index. In the modal create post component, in the onClick button close, I'll change it to a lambda and an arrow. And this time we do have a parameter. So we will receive the created post. And then we will call close modal and pass in the created post. So now we need to update close modal. So I'll just hit F12 to go to it. This now needs a parameter of type nullable post. And I'll name that created post. Right, and let's now do something with the created post. So we always want to set showing create modal to false, but before we do that I want to do an if statement. So if the created post isn't null, then I want to do underscore posts dot add, and then I'll pass in the created post. Okay, so created posts should now show up in the table when we close the model after creation. So let's try it out. I'll hit create post and just add test or something. And I'll scroll down to the bottom and let's see if it shows up. So I'll hit create and hit OK and close it. And there we go. Now it shows up after we close the modal because of this line. And we get a green squiggly. And let's just first check if this is not null. So I'll do posts question mark dot add. Alright, so we have read and create working. The next thing I want to focus on is to solve a problem we have. So our API running in Azure has a different address from the local one. So what we need to do is change the API base address based on if the client is running in production in Azure or not. So let's implement that. So I'll start by creating a folder in the client project. Let me just tuck everything in. So I'll right click it and add a new folder and I'll name it static. Then I'll right click that, add class, and I'll name it API endpoints. And I'll make it a file scoped namespace. So I'll add a semicolon to the namespace, remove the curly braces, hit Ctrl KD, and I'll change the class to be an internal static class. And let's use some preprocessor directives to see if this code is running in development or on Azure in production. So I'll do #if, double tap that, if uppercase debug, then we are running in development. And I'll also do a #else. So then we are running in Azure. Then let's declare the server base URL based on if we're in debug or not. So I'll go back to index and in the code, I'm gonna copy the server address. And back in API endpoints, I'll do in debug private const string and I'll name it server base URL. I'm gonna set that to a string and paste in the server address. And you can't blindly copy mine because this is auto-generated, I believe, randomly generated. Then for the server URL running in Azure, to get that I'll right click server, hit publish, and I'm gonna copy the site by clicking this little copy button, close that, and I'll just paste it as a comment here, and I'll copy this server base URL in debug, paste it, and I'm gonna change the value to this Azure URL and just remove the comment. Alright, that looks good. Now let's add all the post API endpoints. So below that and if, I'll just open server program.cs and then I'll right click API endpoints and do a new vertical document group and just maximize Visual Studio. Scroll down a bit. So now we can see the routes of the endpoints. So I'm gonna start with all the posts. So I'll do internal const string and I'll do posts and then all. Right, so that's kind of the naming convention I'm going for. And I'm gonna set that to an interpolated string. And I'll start with the server base URL and then do a slash posts slash all, basically this. And then for the posts by ID, which we won't really need in this tutorial, but I'll add it anyway, I'll do a method for that. So internal static string, so it returns a string, and I'll name that posts by ID, and that will take in the int ID, right? And then I'll do an arrow because we'll only run one line and return this interpolated string. And for that I'll do server base URL slash posts, and honestly we can just copy and paste this here. So slash posts slash by ID and then slash and then curly braces and pass in that ID parameter. Right, save that. Then the posts create. So I'll duplicate posts all, change it to posts create, and change the route to posts slash create. Then for update, I'll duplicate this posts by ID and name it posts update. And we still get an ID. And for the route, I'll do slash posts slash update and pass in the ID. Duplicate one more time for delete. I'll change the name to delete. And for the route, I'll do slash posts slash delete slash and then the ID. Alright, so that's done. Let's use it. So I'll close API endpoints and program, and I'll just tuck the server back in, and I'll open imports.razor, and below client I'm gonna do add using client.static, so that's available to all our components. So save everything, close that. Now back in index.razor where we get all the posts, I'll do, instead of calling this string here, I want to do API endpoints dot posts all, right? So that should work. I'll delete this comment here. Okay, then in modal create post, I'll scroll down to create post async and change the API call address to API endpoints dot posts create. Okay, let's test this out. So I'll open Visual Studio side by side again with my browser and I'll refresh it. And awesome, we still get all the posts. So let's test out create. So hit create post, just create, and nice, that still works too, right? It shows up at the bottom. Okay, now there's only 2 development tasks left to do, the update feature and the delete feature. So let's do update first. And luckily we can reuse most of the create component for that. So I'll copy and paste it. So I'm gonna expand components, put my cursor on modal or click on modal create post and just do Ctrl C, Ctrl V and select the copy, hit F2 and I'll change the name to modal update post and open that up. And I'll just maximize Visual Studio and let's use the Visual Studio find and replace features to reduce typing. So I'll hit Ctrl F and I'll set it to current document and set this match casing to on. So then I want to replace lowercase create with lowercase update, hit Alt A and nice 5 occurrences replaced. Then I'll replace capital create with capital update, hit Alt A and nice 13 occurrences. Awesome, and let's do the rest manually. So in the code I'll make the post to update a parameter. So I'll add brackets parameter and I'll make it a public nullable post and remove everything that comes after. And I'll add a get and a set and initialize it to null. And I'll just cut and paste it below the on-click button close. Save that. And I'll rename it with Ctrl+RR to post to update with a capital. And here I'll delete the updated post. And in the update post async method, I'll change the HTTP client.post as JSON async to put as JSON async. And the endpoint is already changed to update. And in there we need to pass in the ID of the post to update. So I'll add parentheses and just pass in post to update dot post ID. Then in the is success if statement, I'll extract the alert by selecting and cutting and pasting and delete the rest in the if statement. I'll change creation here to update and for the failed case 2, save that. Okay, now in the display code, in both the on-click button close invokes will pass in the post to update. So I'll do that, post to update and post to update. Alright. And we'll only show this edit form if the post to update isn't null. Above the edit form here I'll do add if and check if the post to update isn't null. Then I'll cut and paste the edit form in there. And then for the else, I'll just render out an H1 with the text loading. Alright, KD. There we go. So this component is ready for use. Let's go back to index. And I'll just start by renaming this close modal with Ctrl+RR to close create modal. And then I'll copy and paste it and change the name here to close update modal. And I'll rename the created post with Ctrl+RR to updated post. And let's change this a little bit. So if the updated post isn't null, then I want to get the unupdated post in list. So I'll do a nullable post and name that unupdated post in list equals, and we'll use link, so underscore posts dot first or default, and for the lambda we'll do post, then an arrow, and if the post dot post id equals the updated post dot post id, and then we'll check if the unupdated post in list isn't null, we'll set the unupdated post in list dot title to the updated post dot title, and we'll set the unupdated post in list dot content to the updated post dot content. Alright, and this works because this is a reference type. Oh, and on this first or default I'll just null check posts, so to get rid of the warning. Alright, then we need another boolean for the update modal. So I'll change this underscore showing create modal to underscore showing update modal. Copy the name, scroll up, and I'll just duplicate this showing create modal with Ctrl D, double click that, paste the name, save that. Then to actually show the update modal above close update modal, I'll add another method, so private void open update modal, and that takes in a parameter of type nullable post, and I'll name it post to update, and above that I'll add a private post which will pass in to the modal update post component. So I'll do private nullable post underscore post being updated and initialize that to null, and in this open update modal we'll set the underscore post being updated to the post to update, and set the showing update modal to true. Alright, and while we're here in the close update modal, above the showing update modal, we'll set the underscore post being updated back to null. Right, let's now actually show the update modal when an update button is clicked. So I'll scroll up, and around line 37 we have the update button, and I'll add an onClick. So add onClick equals, and I'll do a lambda, then we will call open update modal and pass in the post of the current for each iteration. Then I'll scroll up a bit more, and I'll copy and paste the showing create modal if statement and change it to update. So showing update modal, and if so will show the modal update post, and for the post to update we will pass in the underscore post being updated, and onClick button close I'll just rename the created post to updated post, and then call close update modal, then pass in the updated post. Okay, this might be confusing, but it should work now. Let's try it out. So I'll open my browser and Visual Studio side by side again. So I'll hit update on the first post and update the title and content, and hit update, and nice, we get an alert saying it worked. I'll hit OK to close it, and it should close now, but there's something up with the closing, and for some reason if I click close something weird is happening. When we hit close on update post, a post is added to the list. It looks like it's calling posts.add. So what I'm gonna try is stop the client project from running and .NET Watch it again. I'll just try again, update and close, and that fixed it. So sometimes you get these bugs, guys. I recommend then restarting your project, and if that doesn't work, restarting Visual Studio. And if that doesn't work, sometimes restarting my computer worked. So just a little tip there. Okay, so I think update works now. So I'll just update the first post and I'll just remove the updated and hit update, hit OK and close. And yeah, that seems to work. I'll just refresh. And yeah, it has been persisted to the database. So a little hiccup there, but it works now. Right, so we have the create, read and update features done now. Only delete is left, and for delete, when a delete button is clicked, I want a modal to show up asking if the user is sure. So let's get started with that. So I'll copy and paste modal update post. So put my cursor on that, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and rename it to modal confirm delete. And open that up, and I'll maximize Visual Studio. So let's start by extracting the modal body and modal footer from the post to update not null if else statement. So I'll select the modal body, extract it out, and I'll select the modal footer div, extract it out, delete the if else statement, then I'll empty the modal body and hit Ctrl KD, and in the footer I'm gonna change the update button to type equals button, and for the class I'll do btn danger, and for the text I'll do confirm. And I'll change the modal body to an h1, and to the modal body I'll add an h1 with the text, are you sure you want to delete post, in double quotes. And I'll just do curly braces title for now, but we'll make this dynamic in a second. And I'll change the modal title to delete post. Save that. Then I'll scroll down to the code and let's do the actual deletion in this component, so not in the index page, and we'll receive the post to delete from the index page. So I'll start by changing the parameter of the event callback to a bool or boolean to indicate if the deletion was successful or cancelled or it failed. So instead of nullable post, I'll do bool, and I'll rename the post to update with Ctrl+RR to post to delete. And I will rename the update post async to delete post async. And I'll change the HTTP request to HTTP client.delete async. And this does not have a generic. And we'll call the API endpoints.posts delete and pass in the post to delete.post ID and remove the second argument. Save that. And on the alerts, I'll change it from post update to post delete. And on the fail, I'll also change it to delete. And when the delete is successful, we'll just close this modal. So in the success below the alert, I'll do onClick button close dot invoke async and pass in true. Alright, and we'll call this delete post async when the confirm button is clicked. So in the display code, I'll add an onClick to the confirm button. So add onClick equals delete post async. And for the onClick button close invokes here, I want to pass in false because the deletion got cancelled. And in the modal body, I'll make the title dynamic. So instead of this curly braces title, I'll do add post to delete dot title. And actually I'll change it to an h3. And that's only display the modal body and footer if the post to delete isn't null. So I'll do add if the post to delete isn't null. And I'll cut and paste the body and footer in there. Hit Ctrl KD. Alright, so that's the component part done, I believe. Let's now finish this delete feature off in index.razor. And I'll just close the update and create components back in index.razor. I'll start by copying and pasting the open update and close update modal, including the field here. So select that, copy, go down and paste that. And let's use Visual Studio's find and replace features again. So I'll select the pasted code and do Ctrl F. And I'm gonna set it to selection with match casing on. And I'm gonna replace lowercase update with lowercase delete with Alt A, 5 occurrences, and I'll replace capital update with capital delete, Alt A, and there we go. And we will need to declare this showing delete modal boolean. So I'll copy the name, double click, Ctrl C, scroll up, and I'm gonna duplicate showing update modal, double click the name, paste. Alright, save that. I'll scroll down again, zoom in a bit, and in the close delete modal, I'll change the parameter to, instead of a nullable post, I'll do bool delete successful, and change the if statement to check if the delete was successful, and if so, remove the post being deleted from the posts list. So I'll check if delete successful and the underscore post being deleted isn't null. Then I want to do underscore posts, check if it's not null, dot remove, and we will remove the underscore post being deleted. Alright, and save that. Okay, now let's show the confirm delete modal when a delete button is clicked. So I'll scroll up. And I'm gonna copy and paste the showing update modal if statement. And I'll select it. And let's use find and replace again with Ctrl F. Set it to selection, match casing. And I'll replace capital update with capital delete. A. I'll replace lowercase update with lowercase delete. Alt A. Okay. And then I'll change the component name to modal confirm delete. And finally, I'll rename the onClick button close argument name with Ctrl RR to delete successful, and enter that. Alright, then I'll scroll down to the delete buttons and I'm gonna add an onClick. So add onClick equals a lambda, And then I'll do open delete modal and pass in the post of the current for each iteration. Save that. Okay, so we should be done with the coding part now. Let's try this delete feature out. I'll open Visual Studio and my browser side by side again, just refresh to be sure. And I will do A to always restart. So then I'm gonna hit delete on the last post, and nice, we get a modal asking if we're sure. We're sure, so I'll hit confirm and OK, and nice, it disappears. And I'll just open it again and close it to verify nothing happens. Refresh, and there we go, it's still gone. So deletion works. Awesome. Now the last thing left to do is to get this Blazor WebAssembly project up and running in Azure. So I'll stop the projects from running and close all the tabs and tuck everything in and maximize Visual Studio. First of all, we've updated the server, so I want to republish that. So I'll right click it, hit publish, and hit publish, so that gets sent up to Azure again. Okay, with that running, let's work on publishing the client project. We'll set up a simple continuous integration / continuous delivery pipeline that uses GitHub Actions, and we already have a GitHub repository, but I want to commit all the changes we have up until now. So I'll just go to git changes. Okay, and the server publish is done now. Alright, so git changes, and I'll just stage all. And for the commit message, I'll do completed CRUD operations in the Blazor WASM frontend. Alright, and I'll commit staged and push that up to GitHub. And it could be that you don't have a Git repository yet. I don't believe I added it in part 1. So then you can just create a GitHub repository. I'm sure you can do that on your own. Then we need to create the Azure Static Web App resource, and we'll do that in the Azure portal. So I'll open a browser and go to the Azure portal, so portal.azure.com, and I'll just sign in. And then I'll hit create a resource and type in static web app. And I'll hit create. And for the subscription, I'll keep pay as you go. For the resource group, I'll do my mini courses. For the name, I'll do WASM ASP.NET Core mini course - client. Name is up to you. I'm gonna keep the plan type as free, and for the Azure functions and staging details, I'll select the region closest to me, which is West Europe. As the source, I want to use GitHub, so I'll sign in and authorize and just confirm the password. Save to Chrome for me. Right then, for the organization, I've just created one with my own name, so I'll use that. For the repository, I'll select the one we just created, or maybe you've just created in Visual Studio. So that's gonna be WASM with ASP.NET Core mini course. The tutorial is my test version. Alright, and for the branch, I'll select master. Then in the build presets, I'll select Blazor. And our app location is in client. That's why the project is named client. If your WASM project has a different name, I believe you need to use that. We can remove API because we're not using Azure functions or anything. we have our own backend API. And I'll keep the outputs root. Right, then I'll hit review plus create and create. And if we now go to GitHub and open the repository for this mini course. So WASM mini course and go to actions. We see an action is running. So let's click it and click build and deploy job. And we can see what GitHub is doing now. So while it's working, I'll just explain what GitHub Actions are if you're not familiar. In one sentence, GitHub Actions are about doing stuff when something happens in your repository. But the more full definition according to their docs is GitHub Actions is a continuous integration and continuous delivery, abbreviated to CI/CD, platform that allows you to automate your build, test and deployment pipeline. You can create workflows that build and test every pull request to your repository or deploy merged pull requests to production. GitHub Actions goes beyond just DevOps and lets you run workflows when other events happen in your repository. For example, you can run a workflow to automatically add the appropriate labels when someone creates a new issue in your repository. GitHub provides Linux, Windows, and macOS virtual machines to run your workflows, or you can host your own self-hosted runners in your own data center or cloud infrastructure. Alright, and I'll just speed up the video until it completes. Nice, so it succeeded. I'll open up build and deploy, and if we scroll down we see some green text with deployment complete, visit your site at. So let's click the link and there we go. We see our Blazor WebAssembly app is working. Yay! So now it's running in the Microsoft Azure Cloud. And if we look at the URL at the top, we see that it has an auto-generated name and it also automatically communicates with our API running on that Azure App Service resource. I'll just quickly test all the CRUD operations. So create, go, edit, then update it, update that, okay, close it and delete it. Alright, so that's deleted. I'll just crash. And yeah, it seems to be working. Awesome. So there you go. And I just want to mention that the GitHub Actions file isn't perfect because it also runs when the server project is updated. So I'll end this mini course by updating that and just updating a typo. So I'll minimize Chrome and back in Visual Studio. I'll expand client, components, and open the modal update. And I'm just going to change the close text to cancel, just a little bit better in my opinion. So I'll copy cancel, open create, and then paste it instead of close, and also for delete. Alright, save those, close all the tabs. Then let's improve that GitHub Actions file. So I'm going to pull in Git changes the commit Microsoft did for us. So I'll just do fetch and then pull. Alright, and then I'll go to the Solution Explorer, right click client and hit publish. And then we see that the file used for GitHub Actions as the auto-generated name and .yml at the end. And YML is the extension for YAML, yet another markup language. So let's edit it. So I'll hit more actions and edit. And I'm not gonna get into specific YAML syntax in this mini course, but I'll just show you how to make it so that the action doesn't run when only the server project is changed. So first of all, I'll change the name at the top to client CI/CD, and at the end of the branches and then on master I'll hit enter and then shift tab to indent back. And indentation is very important in YAML, so make sure that's right. And then I'll type paths : and with that we can specify the folders this action needs to keep track of. So we must do 2 spaces under paths and then specify our folders. So enter that, 2 spaces, dash, and then single quotes, and then I'll specify the client / ***. So we want to include everything in the client folder. Then I'll duplicate that line with Ctrl D and change it to shared /*, and duplicate it again. And then I'll change it to .github /workflows /client CI/CD.yml, and save that. And I'll close it. And let's finally rename this file. So I believe we can do more actions. Rename. I'll do client CI/CD and rename. Let's verify that. I just found this out during this recording. So I'll right click the solution and open folder in File Explorer, open .github, workflows, and yeah, it changed the name, so that's good. Alright, close that. Now let's commit our changes and see if it still runs. So I'll go to git changes and we see our changes show up. So I'll stage all, and for the message I'll just do improved the GitHub or the client GitHub workflow file. Just add a period. And I'll commit staged push. Then I'll hit the 3 dots here on this GitHub Actions workflow tab and hit opening GitHub and go to Actions. And we see that it's running and that the name is changed. So I'll open it up. Awesome. And I'll just open build and deploy job, and I'll speed up the video for you until it completes. Awesome, so it completed successfully. And now this action won't run if we only make changes in the server project, and the name actually makes sense now. So I'll just refresh it here in my browser, see if the modals have been updated. Guess I need to empty cache. Use this handy on. I'll just try it in Edge. And there we go. So Chrome doesn't always update even though I empty cache, but as you can see in Edge, our Blazor WebAssembly app has been updated because the modals now say cancel. Awesome. And that marks the end of this mini course. So now you know how to create a simple code-first database with Entity Framework Core, hook it up with ASP.NET Core minimal APIs, and consume it from a Blazor WebAssembly web app, all running in the Microsoft Azure cloud. So this came out on 2021 New Year's Eve. So if you're watching close to release, I wish you a happy and healthy 2022. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was useful to you. Make sure you like and subscribe, because then I'll create more of this free content. You can download source code and other resources from the description below. Lastly, I hope you'll join our developer Discord community. In there you can chat with other devs and people learning software development. There's also a support channel to get help if you're stuck on something. Check the first comment on this video for an invite link. That's all from me. Good luck on your developer journey.